Hey y'all, doing another movie review today. So the film that we are talking about, this is one that has been on my to-watch list like forever. I remember this movie, gosh, it was, I kind of feel like it got wide release. It's technically 2016, but it got wide release in 2017. So I kind of feel like it turned up on a lot of people's best horror movies of that year list. And I was like, oh man, that sounds really good. And so I put it on my list and then I just never really got around to it. But then Shudder added it not too long ago. So finally, I was like, finally, I'm going to get around to watching this movie that I've heard so much about. Now, this is a movie called Hounds of Love. Now, I will say that this movie is very much in the vein. It's loosely based on a true crime, and I'll get into that a little bit, like what the differences of it were. And it's pretty difficult to watch. It doesn't really shy away from the events of it, but it is rather... I don't even know if tasteful is the right word, but it does, like, actually, a lot of the stuff that happens in it is by implication rather than showing it graphically. So it doesn't really have the same kind of, like, sleazy, like, exploitative kind of thing about it, because it does kind of pull its punches. But in some ways, I think that kind of makes it, like, creepier, because a lot of the stuff is just kind of left to your imagination. Like, you know what's happening, but they're not going to, like, splash it right in your face. But you imagining it kind of makes it worse. So there's that. So this movie is not the kind of movie that you go into for a good time. It's not any fun to watch. It's it's not really a piece of art that's meant to be enjoyed necessarily. But that said, it's actually like a really brilliant film. I mean, like I said, enjoyed isn't the word, but I got really, really invested in this, and I was just really, I mean, it's a very intense, brutal watch. So if you're not down with stuff like, I don't know, like Snowtown, or Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, or The Girl Next Door, stuff like that, this is along those lines. So if you don't want to watch something like that, and I'm not blaming you if you don't, because it's unpleasant, then, you know, maybe you want to give it a pass. But as I said, it's actually like quite a brilliant film. It's brilliantly shot. It's just, the acting is incredible. It kind of like bums me out, and I was like watching another review of this earlier that said, you know, it's kind of a shame that horror movies don't really get, I mean, it's gotten a little bit better like recently, but they don't really get the same, I guess, recognition when there's really good acting or really good, you know, screenplay or something like that. They tend to really get overlooked in favor of other things like dramas and whatnot. And that's really a shame, because the three principal actors in this are quite amazing. And it's just like a really powerful, like brave performance that all of them put forth. So as I said, Hounds of Love came out in 2016. It's an Australian film. And it is the directorial debut, believe it or not, of a guy named Ben Young. I don't know if he's done anything subsequently. I probably should have checked. But, well, he didn't have, like, a Wikipedia page of his own, so I'm assuming, and I forgot to check IMDb. But this was kind of like his debut, and as I said, it turned up on a lot of critics' best of lists. Now, this movie is very loosely based, well, kind of loosely based, on the serial killer couple, David and Catherine Birnie. Now, we might have talked about them because I kind of feel like for a while on the regular show, we were doing, like, for Valentine's Day, we would do, like, killer couples, and would usually do, like, 3 or 4 of them on one show. And I kind of feel like these motherfuckers were, you know, people that we talked about, because that sounds very familiar. But yeah, they were a serial killer couple that operated in Perth, Western Australia, in 1986, would basically abduct, rape, torture, and then murder teenage girls, or, you know, young women in their 20s. They actually had, I believe, 5 victims. Now, the last one did get away. Now, their final victim, the one that escaped, and the one that helped them get brought to justice, her name is Kate Moore, I believe. Moore or Moore. I'm not sure how you pronounce that last name. She actually wrote a book about her experiences called Dead Girl Walking. She was not a big fan of this movie being made, because she felt as though, well, this is just giving, you know, these serial killers attention that they don't deserve. I can see that, and that is a completely valid, I mean, because she went through this shit. I mean, so obviously she can have that opinion on it. But I don't know. I kind of feel like this movie, it's similar to what really happened, but it's different enough, particularly the ending and things like that, that you could just kind of treat this as more an exploration of this type of thing happening. And this, interestingly, because I think I brought up, like, whenever we do true crime shows about serial killer couples, it's not common, but it does happen, and I'm always kind of like fascinated by the whole dynamic there. And the filmmakers of this movie said that they did actually, yes, David and Catherine Birnie was kind of like the main thing that they based it on, but they also did sort of look into the psychology, the dynamic between serial killer couples, like what happens in between them. So they wanted to kind of put that. And honestly, the psychology, the examination of the psychology of the serial killer couple in this is probably one of the greatest strengths of the movie. And that was one of the things that was the most different from the actual case. So what is this movie about? As I said, now, like I said, this is kind of, it's very, very brutal. It's not, you know, it's not a fun time. And like I said, it reminded me very much of Snowtown, which was also a great movie, although I think I liked this one a little bit better, although I haven't seen Snowtown in a long time. What we have, there is a couple, they're named John and Evelyn, or Evie as she's called for short. And there are these creeps. Now this movie, even though the real shit happened in Perth, Western Australia in 1986, this is set in Perth, Western Australia, but like later on. It's set like in December of 1987, so it's set right around Christmas time. Although, like I said, Southern Hemisphere, it's Australia, so it's like the middle of summer, but it's also Christmas time, which lends it a little bit more horror, I guess, because it's like, oh, this festive time of year and like all this fucking horrible shit is happening. Now, at the very beginning, you have this couple, and they seem to be looking for somebody, you know, for their next victim, I guess. And like, there's this really good, like, opening tracking shot, which is an ultra slow motion of like all these kind of high school girls, teenage girls, like playing netball. And the way that, you know, when the credits are going, like just these kind of slow motion kind of things like on their arms and their knees and things like that. So it almost has this like voyeuristic, because you're seeing it framed from the perspective of this couple of sleazebags that are, you know, watching. They're like, which one are we going to pick, you know, and just like looking at them. So it's just a very voyeuristic, like uncomfortable. This is a movie, not just because it's set in the 80s and everything is like kind of dirty and covered with wood paneling and kind of gross, but also because of the subject matter. This is definitely a movie that you will definitely feel like really, really nasty afterward. Like, oh my God, I need to like scrub, like I need a bleach shower, you know, a Silkwood shower. It's one of those kind of movies. So like I said, you kind of have to be in the right headspace to like want to watch that type of thing. And it's probably not a movie that you want to watch more than once, but it is definitely, I don't know, I did find it a very compelling experience. Like I said, it's not enjoyable because it's very unpleasant, but I don't know, because I do kind of feel like I was watching, there's this one channel called We Watched a Movie, and it's just these two, and they're really funny. They're kind of like, that's not normally the type of movie reviews I would like, because usually they're kind of like shouting, but they go off on like a lot of tangents like we do, so I guess I can't really criticize. But they were watching this movie, and they both actually quite liked it, although they said, yeah, we needed a shower afterwards. But the one guy, and I kind of feel like this was underlying in like some people that didn't like this movie were kind of like, well, why was this movie made? I mean, it's not, and like I said, it's not, I didn't find it to be exploitative in the sense that it's just exploiting a true crime for, you know, titillation purposes. It's not titillating in the least. And honestly, I've made this argument before that making a movie like this, that's, you know, sort of ostensibly loosely based on a real thing that happened, and making it unpleasant, I kind of feel like people have a problem with that, but I think that the underlying assumption there is that movies, or art in general, should only be made to bring people happiness or enjoyment, and I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think art of any kind can be used to explore a wide range of emotions and, you know, and different things. So I don't think that it's necessarily, like I said, this isn't something you want to watch like to have a good time, but I don't think there's anything wrong with you if you want to watch it either. And to be honest, if you're going to show a movie like this, which is loosely based on something that did actually really happen, I think that you're kind of not making it titillating, but making it realistic, which this absolutely is, because this shit really does happen. And maybe, you know, seeing it as it really happens will, you know, kind of wake up something, which it's just like, it kind of leads to a discussion we could have about, you know, what can we do about people like this? How can we prevent this? Things like that. So I think there actually is some value in making movies like this, but I can see how some people might not want to watch it because, like I said, it's very unpleasant. So John and Evie are this couple. They live in Western Australia, and at the beginning, they're kind of like, kind of looking for this girl to kidnap. Now, interestingly, the one that they take at the very beginning is actually not the victim that we're following throughout the whole movie. They're just basically setting up, this is a pattern for them. This is something that they do every so often. They just kind of show it from far away as this girl is walking home alone, and it's daytime, it's not night or anything, it's just like afternoon. She's walking home through this sort of, lower to middle class, like suburban neighborhood in the 1980s. And she's just walking home, and she, gets into the car with them because they seem very friendly. Like I said, it's a couple. You see later on that they have a baby seat, like in the back. So you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, big red flag or anything like that. It's not like a creepy dude by himself. It looks like a family. So she doesn't feel like there's anything wrong. So she gets in the car, and then later on they show the man, like John, like driving out and basically like burying her body like way out in the bush or whatever. So at that point, we're introduced to our other main character, who is a teenage girl named Vicky. Now, she's going through some shit. She has a boyfriend who, seems like a nice dude and everything like that. And they do like a little bit of a setup where, they have this thing where they kind of communicate with one another, like in letters where, they'll write out like whatever secret message they want. And it's just like the first letter of each word. You know what I'm saying? So it's just kind of like this code they do. So they establish that. So that's going to like play into some shit later on. Now, her parents are separating. It seems like her dad is quite well off. I believe he is a surgeon of some kind, which, like I said, Vicky is not based on one of the real victims. She's kind of a composite of 2 or 3 of them, because one of the actual victims, I believe the one that survived, I think her dad was a surgeon of some kind too. But like I said, Vicky is like a composite of several of the victims, so she's not really one of the people. So her dad is a surgeon. Her mom basically just not really for any reasons that are stated forthrightly, but she's just kind of like, look, I want my own life and I just want you to respect that. So she has moved away, and it so happens that she's moved to this suburban neighborhood where the serial killer lives, like a few streets over, like it's a few blocks away or whatever. Obviously she doesn't know that. So Vicky is really, really unhappy about this, blames her mother. She hates her mother. You left us, and it's this whole thing. Which, like I said, very understandable because the girl's a teenager. So it happens, I guess, since they're going through this separation, she wants to stay with her dad, but her dad is kind of like, well, you need to go stay with your mom a couple nights a week or whatever. So I don't know if it was like some kind of settlement they worked out, because I don't think they're divorced yet. I think they're just separated. So she begrudgingly goes to stay with her mom. Now, her mom is just kind of like, hey, we only see each other 2 nights a week and we should hang out. And she's like, well, yeah, that's your fault because you left. So fuck you. I'm going to a party. And the mom is like, you are absolutely not going to a party because your grades suck and you haven't done your homework and blah, blah, blah. She's trying to like lay down the law. It seems like there's some implication that like the dad is a lot more permissive. So it's just kind of like she's used to kind of being able to do what she wants. And, she's not a bad kid. She's actually like a good kid, but she has like started to kind of like blow off school or whatever. But her mom's trying to lay down the law. She's like, you're absolutely not going to a party. You're going to stay here. We're going to watch a movie. You're going to do your homework. And like I said, because your grades are bad. So obviously she gets pissed off about this and sneaks out. So she sneaks out of the bedroom window, at which point she is approached by John and Evie, who it appears, I don't think they target anyone specifically. They seem like they're mostly just kind of like driving around, rather like sharks, like just looking for opportunities, like whoever it is that's alone, whoever it is they can lure into their car, because they have a thing where, and like I said, I kind of feel like this happens a lot like in real life, like with these serial killer couples. I'm thinking like of the Moors murders and stuff like that, when it's a man and a woman, it's much easier to like lure victims in because it doesn't look as suspicious. Like I said, if it's just one lone dude, obviously everybody in the world is going to be like, yeah, that's sketchy as fuck. But if it's a couple, not so much. So I do kind of feel like they exploit that to some degree. And that's absolutely what happens here. And they're not pushy. And I think that that's something that kind of helps. And like I said, you can say, oh, you know, she was dumb for getting in the car, stuff like that. But the way it happens seems realistic to me. It's like I could see that happening. I don't know if I would. I don't think I would have done it, but I can think of like a lot of people that probably would have. Especially she's kind of a little bit lost. Somebody's coming to pick her up, but they're kind of, you know, way at the end of the highway. And it's, you know, middle of the night. So she's kind of walking down the street in what is presumably like looks like a very safe neighborhood, had kids playing outside and all this other kind of stuff. So she's kind of all tarted up and she's walking down the street and they just kind of like, hey, you know, do you want some weed? That's what they first asked. They asked to sell her some weed. And at first she's like, nah, it's okay. And then they're like, you sure it's really good? And we got it right here and stuff like that. And she's like, oh yeah, you know, why not? So she's initially just going to like buy drugs from them to take to the party. And then they're just kind of like, well, and then she's like, oh, I'm kind of lost. And so they kind of just, and they don't, like I said, they don't be like, hey, get in the car. They're like, oh yeah, you just go that way and that way and that way. They give her directions. And then they're just kind of like, hey, you know, we got some more. And then like they just kind of like weasel their way into like getting her to come back to the house to get the weed. Oh, I thought I had the weed in the car. I don't have it. All this other kind of stuff. She's very reluctant, but she does get in the car eventually. And like I said, it might be just because, well, it's a couple. They seem very nice. They don't seem sketchy. There's a baby seat in the back. You know, you're led to believe this is a family. How bad can it be? Yeah, it can be like really, really bad. So once she gets back to the house, they kind of like talk her into, you know, having a little bit of a drink, which they drug. And it's really kind of horrifying because there's this great like chilling scene. The use of music in this is fantastic, by the way. So there's one really chilling scene where she's been drugged, but she hasn't like gone completely unconscious yet, but she's just kind of like going in and out of it. And the couple, they put on Nights in White Satin, that Moody Blues song. And then they kind of start dancing provocatively and like looking at her, and she realizes she's been drugged, and just like the look on her face is just like horrifying because she realized, oh shit, I'm like in big fucking trouble now. But it's like that the use of that song was just like so chilling and just like so creepy. It was just like the perfect song for that moment because like I said, it's this 80s suburban, like kind of low rent, sort of like everything's covered with wood paneling and everything's kind of grimy and it's just kind of like shitty looking, you know what I mean? Like everything's kind of cheap looking. So, but then like this beautiful song and it's just kind of like all sort of hazy and distant. And it was just like, I don't know, it was like, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. So yeah, so she tries to escape, but they overpower her and basically chain her to a bed and proceed to do all kinds of horrible things to her while she tries to think of different ways to get out of the situation. Now, interestingly, in the real case of David and Catherine Birnie, and this, like I said, this is very unusual. This hardly ever happens, particularly in the dynamic of couple serial killers. According to the surviving victim, she said that actually Catherine Birnie, the woman, was actually the worst, like the most aggressive, and she was the one that was like dominant, whereas David was more submissive. She was like the boss. I think that kind of happened a little bit in Fred and Rosemary West case too, although I can't really remember all the details of that. But you don't usually see that. Sometimes you see the woman as like crueler, but sometimes that comes about because they're trying to impress the man. Like, look how much more than fucked up than you I can be. Whereas in this situation, it did seem like Catherine Birnie, the real woman, was very much the boss. And in real life, the couple were the same age. They'd actually met as teenagers and were both equally fucked up, I suppose, and recognized that in one another and then just went on their merry little way. In this movie, this more explores the more regular thing that happens in serial killer couples, whereby, and like I said, I'm not excusing the female character in this either, because she did some horrible shit also, but Evie in this is portrayed as younger than John. Not young, but she's obviously like a little bit younger than him. And it seems as though he kind of groomed her, Also, he is very, very aggressive and violent. It's also implied very strongly that he has OCD tendencies. Like, she makes him breakfast, the same exact thing every day, like, you know, boiled egg and toast, and she has to arrange it just so, like, on the plate. Like I said, it's unspoken, but little things like that, like the way he puts his shoes in the rack when he comes in and he's very straightening, you know what I mean? So the thing about him is that they seem to make their money through selling drugs, selling weed, and stealing shit out of their neighbors' mailboxes, which is a plot point that comes into play later on with their victim. So in the movie, the dynamic is, it seems as though the man, John, is much, much more dominant, and he kind of keeps her and he keeps his wife in line because, one, she's afraid that he will leave her. You know, they say that she actually has a child or children from a previous relationship, but they have been taken away from her. I mean, obviously, because she's got some issues. And so she's kind of like hoping that she'll get them back. And she, I guess she wanted him because he was a little bit older. He had like money, he had stability, because she says at one point to Vicky, you know, he's the reason that I have money to, food on the table and like a roof over my head. So she feels it's almost like he's made her a prisoner as well. And it's interesting because there's a dynamic too where she seems to only go along with this rape and murder thing of these teenage girls because that's what John wants. Because even though we don't see the previous victims, we only see, the thing play out with Vicky. Obviously, Evie is very jealous because she says, because I guess prior to this, it's implied that they had shared the victims. Whereas in this one, it seems more like John is wanting Vicky, like, to do things to her, like, by himself, because he keeps, like, I'll take her to the bathroom, and, like, then he locks the door, which apparently he never did before, and things like that. So some cracks start to appear in this relationship because Evie starts to worry, oh, I'm getting too old, you don't want me anymore, now you're just going off and doing your thing with these girls that we kidnapped, where previously we were doing this together. And so he has that kind of like power over her, whereas she's just kind of like I said, she's a horrible person too, but she has a little bit more of a victim thing going on because she's almost become like, it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome thing, or she's almost kind of like a prisoner. She's not a prisoner literally, like she can leave and shit like that, but she's kind of like an emotional prisoner because she's afraid that he will leave, and he doesn't really give a shit about her. I mean, like at one point she like threatens, she puts a knife to her own throat and says, and he's just like, do it, I don't give a shit. So he obviously doesn't give a shit about her, so he has like all this power over her because she loves him and wants to please him, but he doesn't really give a shit about her one way or the other. So, again, giving him power over her. Now, it's interesting because this particular dynamic, when Vicky is, trapped in their house, chained to this bed that they have her there, she notices this dynamic and she thinks, well, this is a way that I can get out. So she starts appealing to Evie and starts to kind of try to turn the two of them against one another so that she'll be able to escape. And ultimately, that does actually end up working in her favor. This movie, like I said, it's kind of, I don't want to so much spoil the ending or anything like that, because this actually does end, the movie ends differently than the real life case. The real life case ended with, one victim escaping, which is similar, but what happened after that was that, the victim escaped, and then David and Catherine Birnie got caught and arrested and convicted. David Birnie hanged himself in prison. Catherine Birnie, as far as I know, is still alive and still in prison. She's been up for parole several times, but never gets it, and probably rightfully so, because like I said, she seemed like she was the boss or the aggressor in that couple dynamic. So she has not been let out. She is still in prison as far as I'm aware. So the movie plays out quite a bit differently. So like I said, it's very loosely based. I don't want to say it's really loosely based because some of the details particularly one of the things that Vicky does, where she does this like coded letter thing and tries to tell, you know, because they make her send a letter to her family saying, oh, I moved away, like to Adelaide or whatever, so they don't like come looking for her, like I ran away. And her like coding the letter, I think them making her write letters, that really happened. And them trying to, like the couple trying to make the victim take a bunch of pills and like kill herself, that happened as well. So that part is true, but it ended this movie ends in like a way different way, like in a more, I don't know if I want to, it's like a more cinematic way, I guess. I don't know if that's exactly the word I want to use, but it doesn't end exactly the way that it did in real life. And again, going back to what I was saying earlier about like the brilliant use of music, the final scene, because, you know, Vicky has written this coded letter. So, but something happens where the message that she put in there is not correct. So, her family are kind of like looking for her mom and her dad and her boyfriend. And so there's this whole thing. So this final scene is just so nail biting. You're just like on the edge of, oh my God, is she going to get away? Is she going to get killed? And it's just like, man, I was just really like on the edge of my seat the whole time. And I was just like, my stomach was in a knot like that. Like, oh my God, it was like really, really intense. And then like the last shot, they actually started playing Atmosphere by Joy Division. And I just thought that was a really, really good musical choice. You want to hear something weird? I saw this other, I can't remember what channel it was, but I was just watching like a whole bunch of different like reviews of this just to see like what other people thought about it. And this one guy didn't like the last shot. He's like, because it seemed to go on forever because it was like slow motion, which there is a lot of slow motion in this, but it's not slow motion just for the sake of slow motion. It's, you know, it's kind of, you know, tying in with the theme and stuff. It is thematically relevant. So the last scene does kind of go on for a while, but he didn't like that. And he's like, and he thought the music choice was spooky. And he didn't know that song, which I thought was kind of funny. And then he also thought, he said something like, am I at a hipster wedding or a hipster funeral? And I'm like, Joy Division's hipster now? Like, since when did that happen? I was like, that song came out in like 1979, and like suddenly everyone's like shit for being hipster. And I was just kind of like, okay, I guess I'm old, you know. I remember when that song came out, and I was just kind of like, I thought it was funny that one, he didn't know who that was, because that seemed a little culturally dumb, but you know, because I kind of feel like most people would probably know what that song was, or at least would recognize what era it came from. But the fact that he thought that it was like some hipster thing, I was just like, okay, I must be getting old. I don't know how old that guy was, but I just thought that was like really funny. But anyway, but that whole final scene with that song playing, I mean, that's easily one of my favorite songs of all time anyway. And it always, I don't know, it's just like a really emotionally resonant song for me. And I mean, the use of it in this movie kind of rivals the use of it in 24-Hour Party People, where they actually used it in a more on-the-nose fashion, where it was Ian Curtis's funeral. You know, Ian Curtis from Joy Division, who wrote that song, you know, when he died, and they played that song at his funeral in that movie. But in this one, you know, it doesn't have anything to do with that, but it's just, it was still like really emotionally powerful, like the way that they used it. So it does kind of like make you choke up at the end. But like I said, the tension of it is like really fucked up. I mean, this is one of the most disturbing, and like I said, they don't show a lot. A lot of it is implied. Like before, like when they first bring in Vicky, there's still like some stuff from the previous victim who they've killed, and you don't really see her. You only see her from like far away. And there's just this shot of like the floor and like Evie and they're like cleaning up like from their last victim. Because I guess maybe they do this every weekend or I don't know. It's just like fucked up. So they just kidnap somebody and have fun with them for a few days, and then they kill them and dump them someplace. So she's cleaning up from the last victim, and all that you see like on the floor is just all these balled up like piece of toilet paper with like blood on them, and then like this big huge like wooden dildo, and you're just so it's like that. So it's just like you can imagine, and in a way that kind of makes it fucking worse, because you're just like imagining what's going on. And the one kind of rape scene that's in there with John and Vicky, like I said, it doesn't show a lot, but it implies so much that you're just kind of like, bleh. It's just, it was horrifying to watch. I'm really, really bothered by rape scenes in movies anyway. I do watch movies with them in there, but it's always one of those things that's just kind of like, it just always makes me feel like really, really gross. But this one, I think the fact that they showed less was just kind of like, so I will say, you know, if you're not super into like watching, it's not really graphic or anything, but there's enough of it implied that you're just gonna feel really, really nasty and gross afterward, because you'll be just like, oh fuck, bleh. But yeah, it's just kind of like that. Also, I will note that if you are sensitive to cruelty to animals, which I am as well, a dog does get killed in this. Like I said, it's not graphic, but you know, it's in there, and it kind of bothered me, as it always does. So, as I said, this is a kind of a brutal movie, not in the sense of them showing everything. It's not gory or anything like that, but just the stuff that they leave to your imagination, there's enough of an implication there that it really is very, very disturbing and very, very unpleasant to watch. But again, that said, the acting in this is incredible. The guy that plays John, I had never seen him in anything else, but apparently, his name's Stephen Curry, I think. He is apparently in Australia is quite well known as a comedic actor. And so the fact that he was in this and was fucking creepy as fuck, man, fair play. That was like some fucking damn. Okay, so yeah, I don't know. I'd never seen him in anything else, but apparently he's usually a comedian. So seeing him in this, I'm sure was like really probably really upsetting for some people. But everybody in this is good. All three of the principals are great. And like I said, very, very brave, very raw performances. But yeah, as I said, if you're not real into very realistic depictions of rape and, you know, serial killers and just everything being scuzzy and that kind of stuff, like I said, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, Snowtown, stuff like that. If you don't want to watch that, I get it, but this is actually quite a great movie. If you're in the right headspace, if you're in the right mindset for it, and I would definitely recommend it. If it sounds like something that you'd be willing to sit through, then yeah, I thought it was actually quite awesome. So that will do it for this episode of Flickers of Fear, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.